All right, everybody, if you want to get started. Tonight I will sit in as mayor. Jordan is with his golf teams at a competition, so I will be pro-temming this evening. I'm going to go ahead and read through the agenda. Call to order, approval of the agenda, invocation, pledge of allegiance, presentations from former Mayor Bill Conrad, our liaison to FMPA. FMPA agencies are going to be here as well. We are receiving a broadband feasibility study as well as a presentation from the high school career fair. Followed by citizens announcement. The consent agenda has several items. Our commission meetings last, power cost adjustment, Florida Department of Corrections inmate work squad contract, Arbor Day proclamation, fire assessment hardship assistance program, the resolution 2017-36, an administrative task for the Suwannee River Management District fee reduction, International Accounting Day proclamation, the public hearings and ordinances following that will be first readings for both CPA 17-03, legislative public hearing, first reading of those ordinances for concrete and asphalt plants, followed by the resolution 2017-37, stormwater and water management, wetlands management legislation presented by city manager. He was also going to be, I'm going to do the executive officer evaluations, followed by comments and meeting adjournment. At this time, I'll entertain a resolution for our October 23rd, 2017 agenda. Sure. Commissioner Farnsworth is requesting a change.
Request that the resolution 2017-36 be removed from the consent agenda and put into the regular agenda.
Okay. That'll go to 9C or 8C? What's appropriate? 9C? Okay. So under the consent adjustment agenda, we'll remove F and make it 9C. Hearing those changes, does anybody want to offer a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved with changes presented. Second.
Motion by Commissioner McGee, second by Commissioner Coleman. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right, before we get started, I want to welcome up Pastor Karen Burris from Newberry's Methodist Church. And while we're having this moment of prayer, could you all please keep Minnie Jones in your prayers? Zamari Jones, our staff's mother, she passed away recently, so if we could just keep a thought of her. And
thank you for allowing me to be here, and would you pray with me? Oh, gracious God, we ask for your blessing on the city commissioners this evening, on all those who will come and speak, and all those who are here to listen. Lord, we pray that your Spirit will guide the conversation, the discussions, and the decisions that are made. We ask that those decisions be in the best interest of your children. We pray that you will be with all of those who reside in this city and who visit it. May this be a place where people can live in peace and in harmony. We ask, Lord, for this blessing for this night. In your precious name, amen.
amen. We all face the flag and pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Burris. Appreciate it. All right, as we get settled in tonight, for those who haven't seen me run a meeting before, I try to do the formatted informal version. So first up will be former Mayor Bill Conrad, and we'll receive our liaison report from FMPA. Mr. Conrad, you've got 15 minutes.
Mr. Vice Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Manager, Madam Clerk, it's a pleasure to be able to present this monthly report to you all. I attended all the normal FMPA meetings in Fort Pierce this month. And note that September was an unusual month because we had a hurricane. Many of our sister cities were down for a good part of the month, which, as we've talked about many times, the rate we pay is based on our load factor, and load factor is the ratio of your average hour, your average consumption to your peak hour. Because many cities were down, that average hour was a very low number, and so it skewed the load factors. We had the best load factor in Newberry we've ever had. We were only down for about half a day, and we missed the peak. The peak happened before the hurricane. So we had a load factor of 84%, the best I've ever seen it. And the Keys, who is normally really skews it in the other direction, had a load factor of only about 47%. So that changed everything around. Our electric bill was $57 a kilowatt hour, or megawatt hour, the lowest I've ever seen it. Normally our rate is in the 70s on a good month and in over 100 on a bad month. So we were able to reduce our power cost adjustment to zero and still put $58,000 in our rate stabilization fund. So an excellent month for the Newberry Electric Utility, and an idea of what our rates could be every month if we had AMI in a time of use rate where we could get our load factor up to be in what it was in September. As I said, our meetings this month were in Fort Pierce, so we could go down and tour one of FMPA's power plants, Treasure Coast Energy Center down there, which we did. I wanted to describe a little bit about what FMPA is as an organization and how we're set up. And I do that as a lead in to our next speaker, who's going to be Jacob Williams. He's the General Manager and CEO of FMPA. He's going to present a fairly complicated issue to you, and I wanted to kind of lay some groundwork to help you understand what he's going to tell you next. FMPA is an organization of projects. Usually a project is a single power plant, and there are 6 projects in FMPA. The St. Lucie project, which is a nuclear power plant down near Fort Pierce in St. Lucie County, and we're a member of that project. And then we have the Stanton 2, and Tri-Cities power plants. They're in the Orlando area. They're coal plants. We're not members of either one of those 3 power plants. We have a solar project that's just starting up. You all have opted not to be a member of the solar plant, but you may at some time in the future decide to join that project as the landscape changes with solar energy. And then we have the All Requirements Project. That is the biggest project in FMPA. It consumes 80 to 90% of the resources and management energy of FMPA, and of course we are a member of that project. The project owns 5 natural gas plants and a diesel plant at Stock Island in the Florida Keys. The workhorses of the ARP are 3 combined cycle 300 megawatt GE F-Series plants, 2 in Orlando and 1 in Fort Pierce. And like I say, we toured the one in Fort Pierce last week, and that makes all of the FMP plants that I've had an opportunity to tour. And I will tell you that we were treated as VIPs when we went through that plant. And any of you are welcome to tour any of FMPA's power plants. Just tell me, and I'll be glad to set it up for you. But if you go, you'll be treated as VIPs, and you'll be treated as VIPs because you are owners of those power plants. We're not customers. We have bought those power plants, much like you would buy a timeshare or a condo. You have a part ownership, and as chairman of FMPA, I have signed the deeds and I've signed the bonds that have bought those plants and feel very much that ownership. Ownership of a power plant is not like ownership of real estate or any other thing. The value of a power plant has nothing to do with the value of the land or the value of the equipment or the amount it cost you to build the plant. And we've seen a good example with our neighbor 10 miles to the west of us with Gainesville, as they built a power plant at a cost of about $300 million, and after 2 years of somewhat dysfunction, they are buying it back for $750 million. Because the value of a power plant is not the value of the plant or the land, it's the value of the contracts associated with it. And I think it's important to understand that, because we are partners in power plants, not unlike GRU and American Renewables are in a partnership with a plant. We have partnerships that are similar to that, and we have one of our members who wants to withdraw from that partnership. You can withdraw, but like we've seen with GRU, it costs a lot of money. And we are going to have one of our members request to withdraw, and it's going to cost him a lot of money, and it's going to be very complicated. So that's why we've invited our general manager, Jacob Williams, to come and talk about some of the details. He will give you the same briefing that he gave the FMPA board to make sure that you understand, because you're going to have to make a decision in the next couple of months about whether you will allow one of our partners to withdraw from the partnership. And so we want you to be educated, be able to make a good decision on that. So we've got a lot of information to try to give you tonight. And with that, I'd like to introduce our general manager, CEO, Jacob Williams. Welcome.
Thank you. Bill, thank you very much. And I assume this is coming up and it'll be on your computers if you have it. And all of you have the, if you need a hard copy, I'd be happy to hand out, or if any of the audience would want one, it'll come up on the screen. Before I jump into the presentation, just a couple of well done's handout. First of all, Newberry did an outstanding job during the hurricane and the recovery. Obviously, getting all your customers back within a half day. You didn't experience as much trouble as some of the others, but you know, you got to put in context. 70% of the state of Florida was without power as of Monday mid-morning. 14 million people were without. So to the extent you didn't have much in the way of outages, that's outstanding, and the utility ought to be congratulated for that.
Yeah, I can't resist the opportunity to say that at noon on at 8 in the morning we had 100% out.
Yes.
At noon we had about 75% restored. Now, and I jest. The severity of our damage paled compared to the rest of the state. So forgive me.
No, but one of the things, just to put in context, this was the largest hurricane to hit the state of Florida, and it was, from the electric system in the United States, it was the largest single weather event to ever impact the electric grid. There were upwards of 60,000 resources, crews, not only line crews, but tree trimmers and all that were in the state operating. 2/3 were from outside the state brought in. That's a massive thing. Even at the municipal level, the municipal utilities of the nation, there were 2,000 crews brought in from Minnesota, Nebraska, etc., coming into the state to support the 1,000 that were here. It was an unbelievable effort. The other thing I would say is that the municipal utilities fared extremely well. Newberry probably even at the highest level, but in average, the municipal utilities had service back a day faster than all the other, if you were a customer of another utility other than a municipal, you averaged a day slower in getting your service back. So you reap the benefits. Some of this is geography, but even looking within a single county, you'd see that same thing within the county, same geography. The municipal utilities on average were back a day sooner. So I want to congratulate you all on that. The reason I'm here tonight is to talk about the city of Vero Beach, and they have been for 10 to 15 years vacillating between wanting to sell their utility and get out of the electric business. And what we have before you tonight is an option for them to do that. Vero Beach would like to sell its utility to Florida Power and Light. There are a lot of reasons as to why they're selling their utility. We could go into that sometime, but the facts are, and they have, they're an owner in 3 of the projects with FMPA. They're part owner in the St. Lucie nuclear plant, and then 2 units at the Stanton coal facility. And in those agreements, they signed the agreements to finance those in their ownership share. It says Vero Beach, like every other municipal, cannot sell its utility. Well, you see the fundamental problem. They've committed contractually not only to their partners, but to all the bondholders, thou will not sell their utility, and yet they want to get out. And so the only way in which that can happen is two things. One, every participant who's an owner with them and all the bondholders must say, we will waive that provision in your agreement. And two, they have to find someone who will take over their 51 megawatts that they own. And those 51 megawatts were financed using tax-exempt bonds. You go, why is that a big deal? That means you've got to find a municipal to actually take over your position. Well, the only logical municipal to take over is the ARP cities as a whole, because we're a municipal entity. And so they asked us back in December, would you provide us with an option, a price, to waive all the issues in the agreement and allow us out? And the reason there's a price is because they need to pay to get out of these agreements, because these three projects, their market price, their value, their cost is up here. The value of the power is way down here. So every megawatt hour we take in their place is a cost to FMPA and the ARP city. So they've got to pay us to take it. And that's where the $108 million comes in, as we'll talk through. So they're paying to get out, and they're paying to also take on risk. Because our two provisions that we talked to the city was, look, we'll give you a calculation, but here are the two fundamentals. No member city, including Newberry or Clewiston or Fort Pierce, you name it, will not pay any more for their power than they would have if Vero Beach stayed in. So we're not going to raise rates to any of the members because of this. And second of all, we're not going to take on any additional risk unless we're paid to take on that risk. And if somebody gives you just think of a house. They say, here's your house. You go, well, I got to maintain it now. And what if something bad happens? You got to pay for the bad things you didn't expect. Well, our analysis says here's the market differential, but what you don't know is, what if you have a major piece of equipment problem? You've got to pay for risk in that. The other big risk is that someone could operate the high cost plants longer than we expect, and so we got to build in that risk. So that's why we're getting paid for both the market value difference and the risk. And in order for them to do this, every city who participates in either the ARP, of which there are 13, and I'll give you the list in a minute, or if you're a project participant, so you're a project participant with Vero Beach in St. Lucie, every city has to approve this. It's got to be 100%. Now, the vote doesn't have to be at the city level 100%, but each city has to say yes, or there's no deal. Our goal in providing this is to provide Vero Beach and to go through this process with our member cities and to be done by the end of December. And we'll go through that in a minute as to why. But that's the background. The three projects that they're in, again, are St. Lucie. They have 13 megawatts of the nuclear unit in St. Lucie. Stanton 1 and 2, they have 21 and 37 megawatts. The only other thing I'll point out on that slide is if you look at the far right, it says the bond end date. That's important for our analysis. That's when the bonds are paid off for those projects. So Stanton 1, we're basically a year and a half from being done, paid off on all the debt. Stanton 2, we're 10 years out. And St. Lucie, we're about 9 years from paying all the bonds off, or that's what's left on them. And that comes in play in the analysis. The chart here gives you an idea of why Vero Beach is going to pay us, the ARP cities, to get out. This is the average cost for the three projects for a single year, our fiscal year 2019. And the blue bar represents the debt payments. The tan bar represents all the other fixed cost, and essentially the dark brown on top is the fuel cost, essentially. All right. Now, in Stanton, you notice that big blue bar at the bottom is really big. That's because it's the last year of the bond payment, and there's a bullet payment in there, so it's a little bit larger than normal. But if you compare, you look and you go, wow, it's $187 a megawatt hour in cost. Bill just got through talking about this month, past month you bought for around 57, and normally around 70 to 80. But the market price, in other words, what can FMPA get the additional megawatt in the market is only 25. So they need to pay us a difference between 187 and 25 for project 1, 125 versus 25 for project 2. And St. Lucie, the spread's about $50 a megawatt hour. Okay? They got to pay us for the spread because our cheapest option. For the life of the loans, yeah, and then the risk premium kicks over. We'll have to print longer. That's where the risk premium kicks in. And Bill talked about the $25 a megawatt hour. I'll explain that in a moment. Bill talked about the tour down at Fort Pierce to see one of our three low-cost units that you're part owners in. That being Cane Island 3 and 4, which is in Kissimmee, and then Treasure Coast, which is down at Fort Pierce. Their average cost to produce a megawatt hour is just about $25 a megawatt hour. We can get more power out of those units. So that's all it's worth to us is 25. So we've told them, look, we can run these plants more, so you've got to pay us a spread. Real simple analogy, okay? So then what we had to do is not only take a one-year snapshot, but then run it out in time, because you have to escalate what are costs escalating at and all that. I won't get into a lot of the detail other than to say that we did it. We used the assumptions in a conservative way to protect the ARP cities and the bondholders, so that we assume the market value price did not rise much at all, only like 2.8% over a 10-year period, and that the cost escalated for especially the coal plants a little faster than all that. And the big thing that drives our cost from the market is whatever the price of natural gas is. 75% of all the generation in Florida is natural gas. As natural gas prices go, so goes the electric prices in the state. Okay? So the other thing that those in the power side, we valued this capacity. We don't need it. We don't need the power. We don't need the capacity. So we gave them no value for the capacity for those who follow this. And again, we assume that the projects operated through their debt life, those bond dates that we had there before. Okay? All right. What we got here? There we go. Yeah, this is fine. So then if you look at the multi-year run of this, the other thing I wanted to mention real quick, back the slide. We assume, on the second bullet point, we assume the project closed, as in the sale closed, on October of next year. It's going to take a full year to actually get the financial close. Because Vero Beach has got to transfer all their facilities, all the meters got to be read into the system, the PSC, there's all kinds of approvals. So it's going to take us another year. So that timing becomes important. So here's the way that the analysis look on a year by year. The average cost in 19 was 107 versus 25. Then you got essentially in the 90s versus 25 to $30 a megawatt hour. The last few years are a little bumpy because those bonds are being retired in certain years. But essentially Vero Beach, we've proposed that they pay us $76 million for the spread between the cost and the market price. So that's just the pure value, but then there's the risk number. So you see the $76 million, and then in addition we've said there's $32 million worth of risk premium that Vero Beach would pay us for risks that we need to be compensated for to ensure that no members' rates go up. And that risk could be for, like I said, a major piece of equipment fails, that's not in here, you replace it, or most importantly that the Stanton coal plants, which are above market, keep operating beyond 2019 and beyond 2027, where it's costing us extra money that we don't plan on paying, that risk money's there to cover that. Okay? All right. Oh, gosh, temperamental. Again, we talked about the risks that it covers. It covers those two things. The other thing that the risk money covers is that Vero Beach, in their existing contract, they could have bought out of their existing contracts for the ARP agreement. And in the ARP agreement, there was a provision that said you pay $32 million to get out, but over time, Vero Beach could have gotten like $29 million back. They agreed to waive that. They will get no money back. And for that, what they want is they want out of all contingent liabilities. They want to be done out of the business completely. So they're paying the $32 million. They get no access to those dollars. Those are ours to manage the risk for all the members. Okay. We've had two outside analysts look at this. Bank of America, but we didn't even pay them. They immediately came to us and said, here's our view of what this is worth. They said $111 million was their analysis back in January. The board of directors of FMPA, then in the, I believe it was the April meeting, requested that we go out and get a third party who does this for a living, and that was GDS and Associates. They're a firm out of Atlanta that looks at municipal and cooperative, and they came back with $106 million. And the difference between the GDS number and the other is, if you notice, GDS said, well, gee whiz, the power actually is going to cost more. All they did is they ran the plants longer than we assumed, so they shifted the dollars from risk and put it up in the first row versus the second row, because they just assumed the plants were going to run longer. Okay? But in the end, now, as far as the 19 cities, these are the 19 cities who must approve. Every city with a 1 behind their name is an ARP city like Newberry, that you get all of your power from FMPA. So all of them, and then if you have a 2, like Newberry does, a 1 and a 2, you're in the St. Lucie plant, and then 3 and 4. All 19 cities must approve this in order for this transaction to occur. If anyone votes no, then it doesn't occur. What we are specifically asking for, and there's no action required tonight, it's just simply for information so that in the future meetings you can address this, is we're looking for the consent to allow Vero Beach to terminate its contract and to waive the provision that says you cannot sell its utility, and that you as one of the ARP cities will agree to take on their share of the power, the 51 megawatts. You don't take it on, the ARP does, but you're a member, so you must vote to do that. And that for that you're paid $108 million, or the ARP cities get paid $108 million, and that you're releasing Vero Beach of all contingent liabilities. And all these amendments to the agreements are for Vero Beach only. And that one acknowledges it is just for this situation that they're paying to get out of. And that's what the agreements that actually were, I believe, Mike, you may have gotten the documents tonight, or by now they may have actually shown up in the inbox to provide attorneys and whatnot, the actual legal documents that would be terribly boring to go through. So that's the basics. The rest of the information is the ARP cities are a better credit risk. So if you think about it, one of the things you want to know is in the St. Lucie project, if someone takes the place of Vero Beach, are they going to pay the bills Vero Beach? Well, the ARP is 8 times larger, better credit rating. So you go, great, I'm not getting a worse partner in, I'm getting a better, more reliable partner in. Timing as to why we're here in the last 4 months of the year. We're trying to get both all the third-party approvals, that being bondholders, bond trustee, rating agencies, unit operators, etc. At the same time, we're working with all the cities. So we're in the middle of meeting with all the cities to go through this and trying to get this done by the end of December. And then in January and February, the FMPA board would then vote finally on it. That's the FPL offer to Vero Beach. Go through that if anybody wants to, but it's there in your packet, a bit of a timeline. And really, these are motions that we'll have coming forward the next time for you. But for now, I'll just stop and take any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. Given you the balance of Bill's time, we'll take another 5 minutes on this topic. Commissioner Glanzer.
Questions. Are they the first to exit the FMPA? The first ones to ask?
They are the first ones to get completely out. They would be.
No. And the $108 million, if they pay, that would not damage Newberry in any way. I mean,
will not raise rates, and the proceeds will be used in two respects, because it's a great question. Proceeds will be used to keep rates so they don't go up at all, and then about 75 of the $108 million actually goes to pay down ARP debt. So you're actually paying down debt sooner, which means there's less obligation going forward.
And lastly, what's different about Vero Beach? Why are they wanting to get out versus, I mean, everybody else? Nobody has ever wanted to do it. I missed that part. What'd they say? Good question.
There's a bit of dynamics there. This goes back about 15 years, and you must understand, Vero Beach, 60% of the customers of the Vero Beach electric utility don't live in the city. The utility transfers $6 million a year to the city. That's a third of the city's budget comes off the electric utility.
I've seen this movie before.
kind of the reverse situation of what you have here, where you don't even serve the entire system. They serve quite the opposite.
Okay.
And then there's high-cost power that for, the 8-10 years when things were really high cost, it's a toxic brew. It became a very political issue. Vero Beach also owned its own generation when it came into FMPA, and so when it left, it and Lake Worth had a special provision to get out very low cost. No other city had it because they own their own generation, and they could take it back when they left, and we didn't plan for it. So there's a lot of dynamics that make this extremely unique compared to any other city. Today, our rates are low. It's questionable that customers will save anything after this change is done, and the city certainly has a budget hole that they've got to go figure out how to fill. And I can't explain the rest of it. It's a very political subject down there.
It's not going to start a great exodus then from the.
Yes, I would say that's correct.
Commissioner McGee?
What are the, if you could speak on, what are the pros for us doing this? Is it just to kind of wash our hands of these guys so we don't have to deal with the legal, I'm sure they've been legally wrangling and, causing a lot of heartaches?
Pros are three. First of all, the $108 million will compensate very fairly and cover the risk. So we're very comfortable in that. So there's certainly no risk or almost no risk of financial issues. And frankly, the biggest risk to this not being valued right is gas prices go down. Well, if you're an ARP city where 75% of your generation is gas, you do the happy dance and go, oh, great, our cost to all our citizens just went down. Yeah.
Can I get 1 minute of my time back? Because Newberry has kind of a unique situation, and Mike and I have stressed this with you many, many times. 2/3 of our bill is for that peak demand hour. The peak demand hour all goes to pay debt. $108 million is going to come, or $75 million of that $108 million is going to go to reduce debt. That will reduce our piece of the demand by 7.5%. So that'll have a unique value to Newberry that none of the other cities will experience because our load factor is so bad.
Yeah. So there's certainly that paying down debt early. The last is there's obviously the management and the board at FMPA have spent a ton of legal time on this issue with Vero Beach over the last 10, 12 years. And the state legislature and state senate have gotten very involved. This should not be, we don't want to be in this world anymore. So we want to get out of it. So, but frankly, we're protecting the members, and they say it's time to move on. We like the rates, let's move on and go forward.
One last question, Jacob. What is the timeline of the voting? Are we one of the first to vote? Because if the first person votes, we don't have to bother, right? How's that play out? You got a lot of spinning plates in the air.
Yeah. The first city to start voting will be on October 30th, Havana, and throughout the month of November, almost all of them will vote sometime in November. No vote.
Okay.
No. The legal documents are just out, so it's not.
All right.
All
I have
right.
a couple questions. Has Vero Beach agreed to these terms?
Yes.
And what would happen if it's not agreed? I mean, if one of the cities votes against it?
Then there is no transaction, and the political landscape will do what it wants to do.
Well, thank you very much for. Where are you from, Jacob?
I live down in Orlando,
Oh,
over in the Lake Nona area.
All right. I was glad you didn't say Miami.
No,
I had to
no.
make a 6-hour drive. Hey, I didn't want him to make a 6-hour drive. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right, so we're moving on to our broadband feasibility study. Is this Mr. Regan?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, and just to introduce this item, this is Ed Regan. He is with Strategic Utility Management and Keep LLC. He performed our broadband feasibility study for us. Just this presentation, I've worked with Mr. Regan. The topic is too broad for us to boil down to 15 minutes, but because he's here at our
I
request,
thought it was broadband.
yeah, it is broadband.
That's very broad.
Yeah, it is very broad. So because he's here at our request, we've shortened the presentation to as tight as we can. It's
Okay.
about 25 minutes, and asked the city's latitude in that.
So the reason why we did this study was y'all are investing in telecommunications in a pretty big way, or planning to, between AMI and your SCADA systems. And the question came up, is there any way to leverage that to get better broadband service into Newberry? And so the question is, could we do that feasibly? So in this presentation, what I'm going to talk about is 6 important things, which is, first of all, how do we define feasible? And what is the study area for this work? Then there's a lot of rumors floating around on Facebook information and blogs about how unhappy everybody in Newberry is with their current service providers. And so as part of this study, we said, let's find out what it's really like out there. Let's do a survey, an opinion survey. Then we did a competitive assessment, and that was very important because for you to consider to get into this business, you need to know what your pricing is going to be, and you need to know what kind of technologies make sense that bring something different and advantageous to your community. So then we went through a preliminary system design, and to me that was probably the most exciting part of it, but I try not to bore you with it. And there are a few regulatory considerations that would change how you have to operate financially and legally. So feasibility for this study was to provide high-speed and reliable broadband services at competitive prices with revenue sufficient to cover debt and all operating costs. And we defined high speed as 60 megabits per second, which is a pretty high speed, and also with the ability to provide what businesses really want, which is something that may go up a lot higher than 60 megabits, up to a gigabit. So this study hits both of those criteria. This is coming out a little bit faint, but you can see the first thing we did is define what areas in Newberry might be feasible to deploy a broadband service. And I'll jump ahead and tell you that we did pick fiber optics as the way to go as opposed to any kind of wireless, and I'll be explaining why. There are a lot of Newberry customers that are outside of those areas, and that means that you have very few customers per mile of service. And so I would suggest that if you were to get into a retail broadband system, there are ways to deal with that that are not the same as you would deal with everybody else. And so, for example, both for Ocala and for GRUCOM, which are municipal broadband services, you have to do a customized deal. I've seen runs as long as 9 miles to get to a particular residence where it was worth it to that particular individual. So, and there's other wireless technologies that you can use. We used to use Yagis, which are special antennas that go point to point, depending on tree coverage and everything else. But for this study, these are the areas that we're looking at going in and providing a retail service at a fixed tariff price, as opposed to having a customer have to make the investment in the extension or anything like that. Now you'll notice, those of you that are familiar with your electric system, there are areas in here that are served overhead and some that are served underground. And there's an area up there in the northeast that is just water because it's served by clay. And we modeled those areas separately because the cost to serve underground with fiber is about 5 times the cost of serving it on an overhead construction. And luckily, about 60% of your customers in these areas can be served with overhead. And the reason why we broke it apart like that was to say, well, you know, what if you just serve the overhead and not the underground? And it turns out that actually I was a little bit surprised. The revenue requirements for the whole city were such that it was not a smart move to try to only serve overhead. Going forward, you may have certain extension policies and costs, but for this study, we've just grouped them all together. We didn't try to separate them. When you read the study, you'll see the separate cost calculations for overhead and underground. So the customer satisfaction survey was a mail-out survey. 300 surveys were sent out, and when I say 713 unique customers, that means that people that were not in a study area were not included in the survey, and some customers have more than 1 meter, and that's particularly pronounced in commercial, where it looks like there's like meter after meter after meter after meter, and it's the same guy that freezes rats. So we treated that as one customer. We got I think a very strong response rate for a one-time mail-out from residential, and we were able to come up with some statistical conclusions. For the commercial, you can see our sampling density was quite high, but we only had an 11% response rate, and frankly, we could not do statistics with that. Those data are in the report, but they're not really worth talking about tonight because they're not statistically valid. So 92% of the population in the residential population buys at least one internet service, which is the national average is slightly less than that, so it's a pretty high rate. I'd say that a very high percentage reported that they need internet access for their work. And the way the question was asked, it would be for work or school. And, you know, it's maybe more like 35 or 40% in the country, and you're up there around almost 55%. Contrary to what I had been hearing, 82% of your residences think the speed of their service is adequate or better. I will say that the people who were against or had bad things to say about the speed had a lot to say about it, and they gave me long written comments. The reliability rated pretty well, not quite as well as speed, but a pretty high percentage, 72.6%. I will say there was a general dissatisfaction with price. But I will say that the prices that you're seeing in your community are not out of line with what I'm seeing elsewhere in Florida. So these are important criteria when you consider what is your probability of getting people to switch their service to a municipal service, and that percentage is very important for feasibility. When it comes to telephone lines, at least one, 98%. A lot of people use telephones. There's the breakdown between landlines and cells, and some people are actually using IP telephony in the residential sector. Pretty happy with the service quality for landlines and cell phones. Again, landlines are definitely considered a better price than cell phones. When it comes to television, it's very spread out. Very high. I don't have the percentage on that particular slide, but it's in the document. A very high percentage watch television, but not everybody pays for it. So there you are between Cox Cable, satellite, and web TV. You notice that's 10%. And there's an issue that we talk about in there that there is one school of thought that the day of cable TV is over, that eventually it's all going to move to web TV. And I know that, for example, CBS and ABC are changing all their contracts with their broadcast stations to put more and more of their programming onto the internet for streaming. And of course, to have a good internet service is what you need to make that work for you. So you can see what people think about television quality. Off air, not so good. You are kind of remote. They're very happy with IPTV and landlines. The price, again, everybody wants a better price. And the IPTV is very cost effective, so it gets a good rating on price. One of the things we looked at was what is the coverage? You have 4 providers, wireless providers in your community, and those are their antennas. And there are crowdsourcing studies that are available that are in the book that show that overall you have good wireless coverage. And from experience and from literature, for you to get into developing your own cell phone system is not going to be cost effective. It's going to be very hard for you to achieve what they achieve with their switching and their big systems. And for you to get into a wireless situation is going to be very spotty quality of service because of the effect on vegetation on any kind of a non-licensed spread spectrum. So you might enjoy reading about that. Question, sir?
You missed one. The Half Moon Pond there where 41 showing is an AT&T tower sitting right there.
It may just, this is off of a federal database, and I guess it just wasn't there. This pardon me?
Building out there. That's why I was wanting you to.
There are some places that are being built that were not included in the study areas because we didn't know what their densities would be, and didn't, you know, they just weren't built out yet. So they were not. We didn't have accounts in the billing system for doing surveys and so on. So here's a graph that shows you, according to the literature, if you have your the same price and go from a DSL all the way up to a high-speed service of 100 megabits per second, in theory you could get 44% switching. If you're 20% less, than the incumbent price, and providing that level of quality of service, you can get to 54%. In my opinion, given that this is data that's applicable to areas that have either very poor service or no service, that I think that even with a 20% price, you'd be pretty lucky to get 35 or 40%. So you'll see that I've taken that into account in considering what take rates you need for feasibility. These are important numbers. I'd like for you to pay attention to, to meet that 20% number and be competitive in the Newberry market, residential internet service, even at 60 megabits per second, our target is $32 a month. And for a commercial service, it'd be $116 a month. So this is the part where I'm going to skim over it very quickly. Basically, what's happened is that in the last, I'd say, 6 years, passive optical network has been taking over the market. There's over 4 million of these things installed in the United States today. And what we're suggesting here is that you need to have a combination system with what they call a GPON, or a gigabit passive optical network, and active Ethernet. GPON is what's unique and interesting about it, and also about the active Ethernet we're talking about here, is there's no electronics in the field. There's no need to power anything out in the field. It's not going to get hit by lightning. It's just a very robust way of delivering services. And GPON basically works by the light comes in, and then it just passively goes to all the boxes, optical network units. Here's what one looks like. And it also goes back the other way. And you can do, it's 1.2 gigabits downstream and 2.4 gigabits upstream. And if you're going to be doing voice on it, you need to have backup power for the end use. And that's this particular optical network unit has a UPS system built into it. This is what a splitter looks like. That's what this is in concept. That's what it looks like. And you put those little things in here. And what's going on in these pedestals, or fiber distribution hubs, is you're patching, you know, which fiber is going to which house. And basically, you have this, by using different colors, you have going upstream and downstream is on one fiber. So we start off by looking at the proposed corporate network that Mike New provided to me, and expanded a little bit to include providing fiber to all the facilities to replace the cell modems that you are currently planning to put in, which is compatible with the equipment you're buying for the SCADA system. And we put also out to the Duke substation so that you could frankly bring in some of the intra and interstate internet providers. That's going to be very important for something I'm going to introduce you to, which is called over-the-top providers, OTT. And so we built out those costs. I gave Mike a design that includes fiber for the business district and where to put the FDUs. And we subtracted the costs that you need for your SCADA and AMI from the capital costs for the retail services. We segregated retail services into retail services to a business district and retail services to everybody. So we did this with a lot of help from George F. Young, which is your, I don't know exactly what your relationship is with him, but they do your mapping and your GIS work. And basically we worked from maps like this where we knew where every customer was, where your poles were, and basically laid out the system like as if we were really going to build it. I'm going to skip to the killer Diller-Miller for Newberry. Recurring costs, if you look at the bottom there, is insurance, O&M, the internet feeds, customer support, and sales. Frankly, the level of staffing and salaries you would pay is what kills it for you. It's all those costs of having someone that knows how to do IP programming, that knows how to do the provisioning of everything, all those to go out into the field and know how to fix these things, is the cost of having that on your staff. Not to mention you need a help desk. Not to mention that you need sales support if you're going to be selling it, is what really kills the deal for you. So I took the opportunity of looking at, what if you don't do all that stuff? What if you just build the system and lease it to somebody who has already got all that. And for example, Ocala, who I think has a level of interest here. GrewCom has a level of interest. And there's many others out there. So here's the corporate network. This is a really smart thing to do. This particular map doesn't show the level of detail that is actually in it, but it shows where the fiber distribution hubs would go to service all the retail areas. But most importantly, let's see. Wonder why it doesn't forward. Let me try doing this. There we go. There's also we defined what I would call a business district. And these are premises that would be very easy to get to right off of this network. You'll see how it kind of zigzags up through this area right here. And you could, because most of the businesses, there's only 122 separate businesses, and all those businesses are in this purple zone. It would be relatively very cost effective to do it with just active Ethernet, which is basically a point-to-point fiber, and provide Ethernet to these businesses. The only expensive part of that is the internet feed, and I'll talk some more about that. So there were three models that we looked at. One is a vertically integrated competitive model, which would be basically you become like GrewCom or OcalaNet or like Comcast or something like that, where you take all the risk for construction and sales, and you take all the risk of take rate. There's the over-the-top competitive model, which GrewCom has been very successful with. What GrewCom does, for example, is in large apartment complexes, the distribution is provided by the apartment complex owner, and they just provide the feeds. And I know that they're getting all-in numbers for the distribution owner of less than $10 a month for 50 megabits a second internet. So that's an over-top competitive thing, which is basically you're providing the fiber and a central office at the head end, and you let somebody else who has the help desk, who has all those kinds of expertise on their staff. So this is a huge economies of scale business. By the way, when Ocala started their services, I used to work for GRU. I started up GrewCom. They paid $10 a call to our help desk, and they just would answer the phone, Ocala. So that's what an over-the-top is, and that's an important concept. Any questions about that before I go on? Okay. The public service model is something that I'm seeing pop up around the country. And what it is that there are communities out there that are saying, you know what, nowadays, internet service is just as important as water, wastewater, electricity for quality of life. And so they're going out there and they're building out these systems, and they charge it on ad valorem tax. And when you have 100% build out, the cost per presence drops dramatically as opposed to the cost per presence if you're only doing 30 or 40%. Typically what these places that are doing it will do is that everybody gets a lifeline internet service. So and some of these are what you would call smart cities, where you have access to like school board information or municipal information, streaming of the commission meetings and stuff like that. But if somebody wants higher end services such as a cable program lineup or something like that, they go to a website and they pick out who they want for that price, and they buy it through a portal. And the municipality has no hand in that. So I'll tell you that I'm not recommending that for Newberry now. It's still a new concept. Let's see how it plays out. It's something to keep our eyes on now. So here's the results, and it's expressed in terms of revenue requirements per customer per month. And so the first one is just business district. And you can see that even a vertically integrated model is in the range of, you could do it competitively at about a 40% tech rate. I think that's pretty optimistic. However, if you look at these lease rates, if you were just providing the transport part of it, the fiber part of it, they're very competitive. And I think that an over-the-top provider would love to get in there and start selling your basic internet for $100 a month when they're paying you something less than $35. I do think that your take rates are going to be down in this range for the business, given their poor response to the survey. If you look at all of the residential and business zones, you can see that you're out of the money in the vertically integrated model in all cases. In the OTT lease model, you're out of it, except for if you were building it out to 90% of the customers in the study zones. And of course, if you go to 100%, it'd be even better. So those are the financial results. Regulatorily, you do have to get a license to get into this business. For example, one of the licenses is called an AV license or a C-LEC license, depending on what you're doing. You got to have 2 public hearings. You got to demonstrate a public purpose is being served. You have certain accounting and rate-making standards that you have to meet, and your revenue should exceed your operating costs in 4 years, and your bonds need to be paid off in 15 years. You have to collect communication service taxes, and for anything that's like if you had a phone switch or something that's not internet, you would have to pay property tax on that, even though you are a municipality. So, for example, GRU is paying property taxes on cell phone towers because they're transporting cell traffic. I thought you'd be interested, I don't know how often you talk about this, of here's how much money Newberry, the city of Newberry, people in the city of Newberry are paying on their taxes, the communication service tax, for everything but internet. This is the amount that comes back to your coffers. And you can see that it's starting to have a downward trend, and that's because of people starting to use the internet to replace telephones and to replace cable TV. So to conclude, vertically integrated broadband models they're not financially feasible at this time. Dark fiber and OTT business models are only feasible currently as applied to Newberry's business district using active Ethernet. And there's some measures in there that your staff should take into account as they proceed into those networks. And that the public service model with OTT services is a potential game changer, but I don't think it's time to jump on that ship. I would suggest that we monitor the results in other jurisdictions across the USA that are trying that out. In the meantime, there's nothing to be lost with proceeding with your corporate network and maybe going after the business, bringing in an OTT provider to go after the business district. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. We appreciate that. Who has a question? Commissioner McGee?
When you say 100%, are you talking about the entire city of Newberry as far as implementation? Like, you know, because I think part of the problem that I know I hear from citizens is, you know, they're right outside that, they're in that rural area that doesn't get anything but the cell service, and the cell service is so high, and you're limited on what you can get. And the biggest complaint that I get is, well, you know, I'm in the city of Newberry, what benefit do I get? I don't get any of the, and so I was really the one that kind of spurred this whole thing, this whole conversation, and I appreciate all the work that you've done with it. You know, I'd really like to look into that. I know that that's probably a pipe dream because it's probably way out of the bounds of what we could actually do financially. But
well, when I was saying 90 or 100%, that was only the study area. Okay. And as I was saying, is that once you're in the business and once you have a platform, there are other things you can do. For example, when GRUCOM did the whole county school system, which, by the way, didn't include anybody that was committed to those kind of contracts that I knew of already. For example, Newberry, we didn't have fiber out here, so we use unbundled network elements. But that was built into the pricing for the whole package. And so, you know, as you move into this thing, again, I was just taking a straight up cut and dry financial approach. There are things that you can do. For example, we used to use these Yagis to deliver high bandwidth to like an industrial park that was outside the scope of our fiber. You know, you can shoot it 5-6 miles pretty cost effectively as long as they're buying a commercial service. So it all depends on, you know, where you're starting from. I wouldn't say build out everybody, but if somebody really wants it or needs it, there's a conversation that you can have. And they're not going to be able to get it at the same low cost as everybody else unless there's a policy decision to do that.
Anybody else have a question? Commissioner Farnsworth.
Thank you. Currently, like I get high-speed internet from Cox Cable, and it costs me about close to $80 a month for that, maybe $72 a month for that. And if we were to implement a broadband, would we be able to provide it to the citizens of Newberry at a cheaper rate?
If you're talking about the residential market,
Yes, sir.
the answer would be no.
Would not.
Not unless, only if you went to very high, the public service model.
So how is Cox Cable able to provide it to me at that rate, and we wouldn't be able to?
Because, for example, their staffing is spread over many thousands of customers as opposed to the couple hundred that you might pick up at 30 or 40. The numbers are in the charts, but
Right.
so that's a big piece of it. The other is for the city of Newberry to go out and buy just the internet bandwidth. The first gigabit of that is very expensive. The second one is a lot cheaper. And so when you have the OTT providers like Cox or Grucom or even Ocala, they're out there buying 4 or 5 gigabits of internet service, and so they can package it a lot more cost effectively than a small system. So it's really what you have here is an economies of scale problem, and it even gets worse with the cable component of it. I didn't even include the programming costs in this thing because municipalities today just cannot get the kind of pricing that a Cox can get, or a Bright Light, or one of those other kind of providers.
The other question is, if we had our own broadband, would we be able to prevent other companies from providing broadband in the city?
No, you could not. A lot of what these rules and regulations are, they were put into place after GRU got into the business, and they are explicit to protect the interests of the incumbents. For example, you have to charge the same pole attachment fee. You can't preclude them from attaching to your poles. So access to right-of-ways, all those things have to be on the same playing fields, but you could not say, Cox, you got to get out of here, or Bell South, you got to get out of here. You can't do that.
But currently, the city of Newberry does not pay or charge any taxes on broadband, is what I heard you say?
City of Newberry is not receiving any revenue from internet broadband.
Right.
But you are receiving revenue for the cable program lineup and the telephone services that are being delivered.
Is it common for other cities to be able to get revenue from broadband in their cities? Is that a common practice?
I would not say that was, certainly is not the majority, but there's a lot of examples. Let's see, right now in Florida, you've got Gainesville, Ocala, Orlando and Jacksonville are into the dark fiber business pretty deeply. Denali almost went bankrupt trying to do this. But across the country, you'll find 3 or 4 per state that are doing it. I think I did put a reference in here for a study that was done where they went to everybody that got licensed, and most of them really did not make it because they were too small.
And do you know of any companies that would come in and put the broadband in and partner with the city of Newberry, and they do the cost up front?
Well, when it comes to, Newberry has certain advantages. You have the overhead facilities, so that makes your construction costs very reasonable. You have excellent access to your customers because you're already providing them with all the utilities. And so, I think the business district service, when you saw what those prices were, I think you'll find that there's a lot of interest in that. I don't think you'll get a whole lot of response for serving the residential market, but the business district, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Coleman, last question.
So really, all in all here, this really needs to be left to the private sector, right? I mean, there's everything I've seen so far. This is we're years out before the city would be anything to do with residential, right?
On the residential side, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, and that's where most of the complaints are coming from, is that we don't have internet. Same thing Commissioner McGee is, and I thought that's what this was heading towards, but.
Well, I did the best to make it as feasible as I could, but it just didn't get there.
Understood. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again. City of Newberry High School Career Fair. Amy, this has your name on it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Amy's going to present this item, and before he gets out of the room, just want to remind our board and the general public is Mr. Regan's firm put together a very nice report, and for much more complex and much greater level of detail than we were able to go through tonight. But if you have questions based on that, if you'll shoot them back, I'll forward on to Mr. Regan. If at some point out in the future we'd like to have a workshop and discuss it in a greater level of detail, let me know and we'll make plans for that.
Yeah, that is on the SkyDrive, that report. You ready, Amy? Ladies and gentlemen, Amy DeLuzio.
Thank you. So I get to be the one to talk to you about our career fair that we held on October the 5th at Newberry High School. So the vocational career fair was conceived basically by our Economic Development Committee, and they saw a need to develop a trained vocational workforce for local businesses within our city. And they kind of looked at it two ways. Not only would that benefit our citizens, but that would also benefit by having the workforce. That would in turn assist the city in drawing more desirable manufacturing industry here into our community. So this year, this was our third event, and we had approximately 300 juniors and seniors attend. We originally held the first two events at our Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center, and then this year we tried to change it up a little bit, and the venue moved to Newberry High School. So the intent of the move was to increase the attendance by our high school students, and therefore making sure it was during a time that they could attend, and by it being at the school, it made it, the school partnered with us. So we needed to ensure that the programs that we did present were what our students wanted to see. So Newberry High School actually did a survey at the beginning of the year. We compiled that survey and the results, and then we invited the highest interest vocations to the high school to attend. One of the fun things about that is our students were very excited to think that they had a part in not just participating in it, but in creating our vocational career fair. Another interesting development that makes us a little bit different from some of the other vocational career fairs is that we invite business partners to come out and attend. So our business partners come out and we match them up with the vocation. So the vocation, we actually had 3 colleges. We had Santa Fe College, we had Marion Gateway College, and Florida Technical College. And the programs, the technical and vocational programs that they came out and presented, we matched them up with business partners. So we had Ulrich Construction that came out and partnered with, say, the construction and technical programming. That gave our students an opportunity, as you can see from some of these pictures, not only to meet with the colleges and meet with the administrators, but then to turn around and go to the businesses and say, okay, well, if I have this degree, what can I do with it? So it helps to draw their interest back in their hometown, so it keeps them here. It keeps our businesses filled with certified employees, and it gives our students the opportunity to stay home and work at home. And that would be the end. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Miss Amy. I will speak for myself and say that I don't believe that every child needs to go to college. And applaud you and anybody else that worked on this initiative to provide some other avenues for folks that are just simply not interested or don't have any desire for various reasons of going there. So definitely appreciate your help. Commissioner Glanzer.
I also saw someone in the slide that was a graduate from Newberry High School as a presenter, so that was kind of exciting to see. He's a local businessman, and that's good. Thank you for doing that.
Mr. Chair.
City Manager?
I'd just like to add a few comments that Amy wouldn't put in her presentation. As she mentioned, this was our third. This was a brainchild from the Economic Development Committee, and they share Commissioner Martin's thought that not everybody needs to go get a college degree and get a white-collar job, and that Newberry in particular wants to put some energy into blessing and certifying vocational trades. And so they asked for this. Amy had mentioned we've conducted them twice before. On a scale of 1 to 5, we were probably averaging a 3, but we were not getting the high school turnout who we were really gearing for. It was really people were showing up, were looking for jobs, and this was all about vocational careers and a chances to get a vocational education. So so we shifted gears, moved it to the high school. And on a scale of 1 to 5, and under Amy's tutelage, we hit a 10. I walked in that room and nearly passed out. Luckily, we had paramedics there as part of a vocation, so they were able to attend to me. But the kids were excited. It was a great opportunity for them to see some real career potential. It was an amazing event, and Amy worked. She put in a ton of energy, almost single-handedly, into pulling this one together, and it was just a huge success. So I wanted to publicly recognize her for her efforts and tell you guys what a great event this one turned out to be.
Thank you, Amy.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Moving along, citizen announcements. 2-minute time limit. Mr. Day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Marlon Day, Library Manager at the Newberry Branch Library, Alachua County Library District. I'd like to bring to your attention the following. First, this Friday, October 27th, is the character parade at the Newberry Elementary School for all children. Following the school day, we'd like to invite the paraders to the library with their book for a costume show and tell. We're going to begin this program at 2:30 right after school. Second, on Halloween afternoon, October 31st, we're having our traditional Halloween party. It's always a lot of fun every year, so we're inviting patrons to come to the library in costume before they go trick-or-treating for games and fun. This program is going to begin at 3 o'clock. Lastly, the Newberry Fall Market Festival is on Saturday, November the 4th. In conjunction with the Main Street organization, we are bringing back the Dazzlers from the University of Florida. Last year they appeared and were very popular. Following their performance this year, which begins at 11 a.m., the Dazzlers will once again be inside be inside the library to help children prepare a fall-themed craft. In addition to the Dazzlers, because it was pretty successful last year, this year the library decided to bring in some other groups. At 10 a.m. on November the 4th, we'll have Irish dancers from Hogan School of Irish Dance performing right outside the library. After the Dazzlers, a group of amateur dancers, the Gainesville International Folk Dancers, will perform at 11:30. And lastly, at noon, we'll have the Southern Rhythm Cloggers. They are a 2-time national champion clogging group out of Lake City. They're going to perform at noon. So we hope that everybody enjoys the Fall Festival and stops by the library while they're there. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you. As always. Ms. Loy.
Hi, Peggy Loy. I'm talking for the festival, Main Street Festival. Just a few things to add to what Marlon was saying with all those exciting dancers. There will be a lot of activities for children, some of which you've seen in the past, but lots of things for kids to do. There will be food, yum, yum, food. And it's really just a lot of fun. Craft makers and the people who present their wares. It's really just a lot of fun, too, just to come out and walk the street and visit with your neighbors and friends. Some people you haven't seen for a while. We see a lot of hugging on the street. That's always a lot of fun.
Thank you. Anybody else? Very good. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, minus F. Do I hear a motion? Commissioner McGehee, Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion on the item? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. I will include in that power cost adjustment, we're actually going to be at zero this time around. Bill had mentioned that in his report, but I wanted to make sure that was brought up. So no factor there. All right, moving on to public hearings and ordinances. Item A, legislative public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2017-15, the CPA 17-03, concrete and asphalt plants. City Attorney, you want to go ahead and read that by title only?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 2017-15, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending the text of the City of Newberry Comprehensive Plan as amended by amending policies URI.1.1 and URI.13.1 of the future land use element in accordance with Chapter 163.3177 Florida statutes relating to concrete and asphalt batch plants, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date.
Mr. Mayor, Brian Thomas, our planning director, will lead us in this discussion.
Good evening, Mr. Thomas.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm late to the podium. I was going on an old agenda. I had two other items before this one. Okay, as stated, we're looking to amend the comprehensive plan and the land development regulations relative to concrete and asphalt batch plants. We had an inquiry from someone that was interested in actually doing a concrete batch plant here in Newberry, and so when we started looking into the regulations that exist relative to that request, we discovered that both concrete and asphalt batch plants were currently prohibited anywhere, this is both in the comp plan and in the LDRs, anywhere that's designated as a high groundwater aquifer recharge area. Well, when you look further into that, it turns out, and you have the map of that recharge area, the entire western half of Alachua County is in the high aquifer recharge area. So we started looking a little bit further to find out, the story behind that, why Newberry and not surrounding communities had this prohibition. And so what we found was there was according to Attorney Walker, who described it in the planning and zoning meeting where this was heard, there was more of a political background to it than an actual necessarily environmental concerns several years ago when it was originally prohibited back in 2007, I believe it was. And when you look at the list of prohibited uses that this is categorized with, they tend to be much more intensive, things like paper and pulp manufacturing or petroleum refining, really large-scale, heavy-duty industrial uses. Whereas concrete and asphalt batch plants tend to be much smaller businesses, much smaller, less footprint, and they're really geared towards construction and development in the fairly close area to where they're located. By necessity, they have to be close to where the actual end user is. And so what we found is batch plants are state regulated, both types. As long as the plant follows the state regulations, meets the state requirements for environmental regulations, there doesn't seem to be a very high risk at all of negative environmental impacts. As I mentioned, they're necessary for local development because of the nature of concrete and liquid asphalt. You have to be within a fairly close proximity or else it hardens up. And so typically you're within 45 minutes driving time or so of where the plant is going to be. Took a look at surrounding areas because of this prohibition, and what I found was that basically the other communities surrounding us allow them, usually through some sort of special use or special exception process. And so we really were kind of the only community that didn't allow it. It seemed a little ironic that we have a large-scale concrete plant with Argos, but we didn't allow these little small-scale batch plants. So, sir.
How did A Materials operate their plant right there behind Watson?
That was actually the origins of the prohibition when that application came in and was passed. That was the origin of the movement to prohibit them, and it had to do with competition. From what it was described by Attorney Walker, it had to do with competition, someone trying to keep competition out and that kind of thing. And so it wasn't necessarily.
Using the government.
Yeah. So.
Commissioner Glanzer?
So the plant we have here is not a batch plant?
It is a batch.
What is it? What we have
The plant that we have here is a concrete batch plant. It was permitted prior to the prohibition.
Okay.
They also have a site plan that was approved prior to the prohibition for an asphalt batch plant as well, which they're actually now in the process of.
And that's what brought this?
No, actually, this was another applicant or potential applicant that requested information on creating another concrete batch plant in Newberry. And so.
And how did this go through with planning and zoning, Brian?
Planning and zoning passed unanimously. There were some, we came up with a draft amendments to the legislation we have, and then planning and zoning made some additional recommendations for language changes, and so we've incorporated those.
Is that what's in the red?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Further discussion? Any comments from the public? Okay, are we at the point where we can put a motion on the floor, and this is an actionable item, correct? What is the pleasure of the commission?
I'll second it.
Okay. Commissioner McGee's movement, or motion rather, and Commissioner Glanzer second. All those in favor, say aye. Oh, I asked for it already. Oh. Is there public comment on the motion itself? Going once, going 3 times. Very good. Any further comment from the commission then?
There seems to be a lot less controversy.
Oh, yes ma'am.
Sorry.
Pardon me. You just come up to the podium, pay your $5, and just state your name.
I'm
Good.
Darlene McGehee. Back when Argos, it was actually Florida Rock, came in here, a lot of people did not realize how detrimental it was. We live right in front of Argos, is what it's called now. But a lot of people don't realize at night they burn tires. They're not supposed to. You have dust all over the place, and the noise is ridiculous. How much will this batch plant affect the noise in the city of Newberry?
Good question.
And
What's this?
And also about our water.
Mhm.
When we have all of the tires and things that are burnt, and we know that that happens because over our pasture, we see it.
Mhm.
But it's done at night, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And the noise is horrible. You can't even open your windows. So I just want to know, what kind of effect will this plant be on our water quality and the pollution?
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good questions. I don't know if we can.
Mr. Mayor, I can speak to broadly to those issues. We don't have an
City manager?
expert in the room that would speak to those issues, but there's a large difference between a concrete batch plant and a cement manufacturing plant. Argos is a cement manufacturing plant, which is a heavy industrial process. It's also very heavily regulated. They very high temperature kilns where there's an air pollution permit that is very stringently monitored for mercury and sulfur dioxide emissions and nitrogen dioxide emissions. A concrete batch plant isn't manufacturing anything. It's a mixing plant, if you will, where one of the ingredients is cement that might be manufactured at Argos. The other ingredients are rock and sand and water and air entrainment. So there are some permitting requirements. The permitting requirements essentially have to do with the dust associated. There's an air permit associated with the dust that comes off of the cement, which is stored in a silo. So they have filters to capture those dust, and there's and when they wash out their trucks, they create some excess water that is normally stockpiled in a stormwater facility that is also permitted by the State Department of Environmental Protection. So they are somewhat noisy on by comparison to a small commercial industrial application. They can be loud because of the clanging of metal. Compared to an industrial cement manufacturing plant, there's no comparison. So I wouldn't say they're not loud. It's just by comparison to an industrial plant, they're not loud at all. Compared to a quiet residential neighborhood, they're pretty noisy during the hours of operation. And concrete batch plants typically are 7 to 5 type of operations. That changes only when there's like an FDOT nighttime project, because concrete has to be put out close to the time of use. As Brian mentioned, there's like a 45-minute window. If people are pouring concrete at night, and that typically only happens for state highway projects, or like if you're building a Walmart distribution center where you want uninterrupted supply of concrete, they might operate at night. Aside from that, they're typically following daylight hours when typical construction is going on.
And if I'm not mistaken, some of those things, location, noise, hours of operation, can to some extent be addressed in the permitting process, correct?
Yes,
so
sir,
that
actually,
onus comes back to us to speak to that.
Well, actually, some of the language that we're adding requires that the applicants for the special use permit for a batch plant provide a report that includes basically all of those elements: air emissions, surface and groundwater emissions, potential noise levels, truck volumes, traffic volumes rather, potential odor, glare, all of that. And then the report then is available for the Planning and Zoning Board and then the Commission to review and decide if it's an acceptable use.
Okay.
And then also too, this is the comprehensive plan amendment language, which has very similar language to the land development regulation language, with the exception in the LDRs. It also says that it gives the city the right to have an outside independent consulting firm at the applicant's expense evaluate the application. Since none of us are, as City Manager mentioned, we're not experts in this field, it gives us, the city, the right to go ahead and hire those experts to evaluate the application if necessary.
Very good. Okay. Well, Ms. McGee, I hope that gives you some level of comfort and addresses a couple of that questions that you had. Very good. Any other questions from the public? Any other further discussion on the dais? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is for approval. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. The nays, or the commission will move to a roll call. Commissioner Coleman? Commissioner McGee? And Commissioner Glanzer? Okay. I myself would vote aye. So it'd be 4-1. The ayes have it. Okay. Moving on to 8B, legislative public hearing, first reading of ordinance 2715-16, LDR 1706, referencing the same subject matter, concrete and asphalt plants. Madam Attorney, would you do us the honors of reading that in title only?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is ordinance number 2017-16, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending the text of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, amending section 4.17.4 entitled Prohibited Uses and Structures, end quote, to amend the requirements for location of concrete and asphalt batch plants, and section 14.7 entitled, quote, Special Permits for Industrial-Based Uses or Activities, end quote, to amend the requirements for permitting industrial-based uses or activities, repealing all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Mr. Thomas, you have a presentation on this as well?
Basically the same presentation. Our comprehensive plan and land development regulations in this particular instance are almost parallel with each other language-wise, and so we would be amending 14.7 Currently, 14.7.4 states prohibited uses and structures and lists the prohibited uses. We would take number 11, which is asphalt and concrete batch plants, and change it to say except by special use permit as outlined in section 14.7. And then further, 14.7 would be amended with the same language that requires the applicant to provide a report specifying all of the potential emissions, noise levels, etc. Also indicating that the best available technology is being used to control impacts from the industrial-based use or activity, and then giving the city the right to obtain an outside independent consulting firm at the applicant's expense to evaluate the application.
Okay. Given the tone of the prior discussion, I'll go ahead and ask for a motion at this time, and we can do the discussion simultaneously with the motion on the floor. What is the pleasure of the commission? Commissioner McGee's motion, Commissioner Coleman's second. What is the discussion on the commission? None? City manager? None?
Same thing.
Same thing. Any new questions that came to the public's mind? Ms. McGee? Similar? Okay.
I got a question.
Fire
So
away.
this person primarily just regulates the first one that was just passed? Is this the one that was just passed?
The
Comprehensive plan, and now this is the land development portion of that.
Yeah, no.
Did this have any discussion at the planning and zoning level either? Or how was the flavor of that?
Essentially the same discussion, because again, the language in the comp plan and the language in the LDRs are almost identical in this respect, and so the discussion was essentially the same for both, and that's why the language amendments are almost identical.
Understood. Commissioner Farnsworth, what else did you have?
No, just that was the first one passed, so this seems to cover us having a little more control. So the reason I didn't vote for the first one was I don't mind clean energy or clean industrial coming into the city of Newberry. I would consider this to be clean industrial, and I'm just a little concerned about the impact on our aquifer and the city residents. So I'm going to vote for this one because we need to have the regulation.
Very well. Any other further discussion from the dais or the public? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it on that one. Motion passes. All right, turn the page. Agenda items number Roman numeral 9A, Resolution 2017-37, Stormwater and Wetlands Management Legislation. Manager Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an item that we've discussed many times. Has to do with the proposal from Alachua County to impose countywide stormwater regulations and countywide wetlands regulations. When I mean countywide, that is in the incorporated areas within the county. So with regards to stormwater, they've been working on this for about 2 years. This commission has authorized the mayor signing a letter urging the county commission to afford cities the opportunity to opt in, but not incorporate all the cities, or to impose their legislation into all the cities without that opt-in clause. Then a few weeks later, this was in August of 16, a few weeks later, the city adopted a resolution, again requesting the same measures. As we move forward, we're getting closer to the end. And so the county now is down to, we're going to have what they're calling a public policy meeting to kind of decide publicly where they want to go with this issue as a board. They plan to follow that. They plan to follow that with a workshop to have a greater level of discussion, and then set the adoption hearing. So we don't know exactly where things are going, but we anticipate that it will be countywide. Also, after the stormwater issue got brought up, the county brought wetlands into the picture. The county is already regulating wetlands in unincorporated areas, and their consideration on that will be to take those same wetlands regulations and impose them in incorporated areas. So no, they're running it as two separate legislations, but they're now running on a parallel track. They're running together as two separate legislations. So we've showed up at every meeting. The board has given me direction to speak out against this. We, from our understanding from analysis, it affects affordability. There's long-term maintenance issues. There's a sole proprietor for the material that's being manufactured. And he happens to be one of the stakeholders that is working on the report with the county, that advising them to do this. There's quite a big push against, and the county commission really hasn't formally said where they're going to be on this, but in opposition to this, last year Representative Clements introduced legislation that would have preempted the county from imposing stormwater regulations within the cities. Any regulations that were more stringent than state regulations, and that legislation didn't get adopted, didn't get passed. It died in committee. So this year, Representative, it was a statewide regulation. So this year, the bill is being retailored as a local bill that will only apply within Alachua County. And so we're going to try to move it forward. And Commissioner Clemens is asking that we deliver resolutions from 9 cities supporting his local bill that we can use in Tallahassee to try to get local legislation that says that we're preempted, that the county can impose this within municipalities. And he's asked for separate resolutions for this and the wetlands. He's now proposing, or he's actually written 2 different proposed legislations. They're on the desk. I put one out. For consideration tonight is only stormwater. We didn't have the resolution written for wetlands by the time we went to press with the agenda. So the wetlands one will show up on the next meeting agenda. They've asked us to try to pull these together by mid-November. So we're on a pretty tight time frame. Currently, Newberry is kind of taking the lead with the other municipalities, but there's plenty of supporting cast. My job is to rally the other city managers to make sure we get this important legislation in front of boards for consideration. I'm asking our elected officials to reach out to other elected officials in the other 9 municipalities and ask them to support the resolutions. And as I told one other municipality today that said, I really don't even know what's going on with this, not sure where we stand on it. And I think a main thrust is this has a significant cost impact to development in our communities, and supporting Representative Clemens' legislation doesn't mean we're anti-environment or anti this legislation, because if the county affords us the opt-in opportunity, we may all elect to opt in because we think it's the right thing to do, but at least then we'll have a choice. The way it's written and the county proposes to move it forward, cities have no choice in this matter, and that's really what we're asking the state legislature to do, is give us the choice as to whether we want to adopt this legislation within our city limits or not. So before you is the resolution related to stormwater, and we'll have a companion one related to wetlands at our next commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I just wanted to clarify and or reiterate what you just said. So one of the stakeholders and the people pushing this at the county level is one of the people that is actually providing the product that the ordinance will actually use. Do I have that correct?
That is correct.
Fantastic. So this would be the equivalent of Davis Chevrolet pushing an ordinance through the county that says the county has to buy Davis Chevrolet vehicles.
Yeah. Yes, and you're correct. Not just Chevrolets, Davis Chevrolets.
Davis Chevrolet. Fair enough. Okay. Do you? Is it a pleasure of the commission to try to entertain this single resolution tonight?
Yes.
Or wait till the next meeting to do both of them at the same time? If we're going to do this one tonight, I'll need to have the attorney read the resolution into the record. Okay. So let's go ahead and move in that direction. Madam Attorney, if you want to go ahead and read the resolution into the record for us.
Yes, sir. This is resolution number 2017-37, a resolution of the City of Newberry, Florida, in support of a local bill amending Section 403.0891 Florida statutes, requiring that Alachua County Stormwater Management Plan and Program incorporate the best management practices adopted by the Department of Environmental Protection, specifying that applications for development approval which implement the best management practice are presumed to be in compliance with certain local government water quality standards, prohibiting Alachua County from adopting or enforcing more stringent water quality standards for stormwater discharge to surface waters, wetlands, or groundwater, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass resolution number 2017-37 upon first reading by title only.
Move to approve. I have a question.
Commissioner Farnsworth's motion, Commissioner McGehee seconded the motion. And Mr. Farnsworth, you have the floor.
Mike, the legislation that Representative Clemens is presenting, does that only apply to this situation? Or is that going to be like anything that the county brings above and beyond what the state of Florida has already in place? Or is it just going to be for this one thing?
The legislation that he's introducing is very specific to stormwater in one instance and very specific to wetlands in another. There was some consideration and discussion, and I don't pretend to understand the best ways to get legislation passed at Tallahassee, but there are experts in the room that are involved in this. In that meeting room, that were involved in the development of this, and it was their recommendation that we write local bills and that each one be specific to the one issue rather than just preempting the county on everything. That seemed to be a harder road to hoe for the for passage at the state level, and so the decision was made to, well, let's just be extremely specific to the two issues at hand. And if more issues come up later down the road, we'll deal with more issues when they come up later down the road.
Okay.
Very good. Is there any further discussion on the commission? Any questions or discussion from the audience, the public? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 2017-31 passes unanimously. All right. Roman numeral 9B, Executive Officer Evaluations. Per our last meeting, we were having evaluations for the city manager, city attorney, and the city clerk. So I can confirm that I have 5 evaluations. I will turn those over to Deborah in the morning. If you have any questions, you've got about 12 hours.
Does the city, the city attorney, that include both of them? Or we just, or did just one?
Depends on what the scores are.
That's what I was afraid of.
Very good answer.
And you'll note that the city attorney, Mr. Walker, conveniently missed tonight's meeting.
That reflected in my evaluation.
After the agenda was published.
Fair enough. Perfect. Was there any additional, anything else that we needed to worry about on that? I don't think so. Okay. Okay. Roman numeral 9. Item C, Commissioner Farnsworth, this was your resolution 2017-36, the Suwannee River Water Management District fee reduction, pulled from the consent agenda, so we're adding it on here. City Manager, can you summarize that for us?
Mr. Jones is going to summarize this item for us.
Great song.
Thank you. This is the housekeeping resolution that we bring before the commission every year for consideration. Basically, it's a request by resolution for reduction of fees for any public purpose project at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection or Suwannee River Water Management. By passing this, it limits that fee to $100 or less.
Fantastic. Commissioner Farnsworth, was there particular questions that you had with regards?
No, I just don't like the resolution being put in the consent agenda.
Fair enough. Would you like to offer a motion to approve the resolution this time?
Trafficus.
Yes, sir.
This is resolution number 2017-36, a resolution of the City of Newberry, Florida to request the Swanee River Water Management District and Florida Department of Environmental Protection reduce fees for public purpose projects in the City of Newberry, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass resolution number 2017-36 upon reading by title only.
So moved.
Commissioner Farnsworth motion, Commissioner Glanzer second. Is there any further discussion on the commission? Any further discussion from the audience and the public? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Resolution passes. We are on to comments. City Manager, are you ready to go?
Yes, sir, I am.
Fire away.
Just an update on Newberry CRA. I transmitted an email to the Alachua County's manager last week inquiring about the status of the interlocal for Community Redevelopment Agency. This board adopted the interlocal or approved the interlocal in August, I think the first meeting in August, and transmitted it to the county, and they have not agended it. And so I inquired about that, and the report I got back is that at the county commission's direction, that our CRA or the CRA initiative was being connected to the road transfer issue. And so I didn't recall it that way. I recall from our joint meeting, Commissioner Byerly felt strongly about coupling the two, but none of the other county elected officials did. So, and that's been my response to the county manager. I think I copied all of you on that correspondence, so I request that maybe you engage with your elected officials at the county level to see if that is their will that those items be coupled or not. I think it's not in anybody's best interest to couple them. I think that we're all big enough parties to discuss each for their own merits, and that's what I've asked that the county do.
I thought the email was perfect and spot on, and I wanted to ask, do you remember what day the joint meeting was, that if we want to go back or the public wants to go back and check the video? Seems to me it was June.
We'll have that really quickly because it's easy to load that up. I see Amy's working on that, so we'll pull that up for you. I think it was June 26th, to be honest with you, or June 12th.
And what commissioner actually supports us and covers this out here?
We have no single member district, so all 5 commissioners are looking out for Newberry's best interest.
Thank you.
What other comments do you have while Amy's looking that date up for us?
On Wednesday, June 26th. On Wednesday, city staff, along with some other local officials, Stephen Davis, not officials, but local community residents, Stephen Davis, a developer, Phil Holly, are going to be meeting with Charles Lane. He's the COO of IFAS from the University of Florida, to introduce our Newberry Agritech Research Park and Innovation District.
When is that? I'm sorry?
That is Wednesday.
Is it open meeting?
It is an open meeting, although I have to tell you that only one elected official that can vote should attend. The mayor's going to be there.
What time?
It's going to start at 10 or 10:30. If you're interested in attending, let me know, and I'll make sure I get you the right invite. So also, this is a presentation that we do from time to time, but I realize that we haven't done it for our city commission. So sometime in November, we're going to bring you our presentation and kind of show you the concept of what's being proposed with this Agritech Business Park. I was speaking with someone today about many of the initiatives that you have us working on at the staff level. And my comment to them was well, none of these all by themselves are single game changers for Newberry's, but collectively they are. They will be. And then I stopped and I said, no, I take it back. One of these is a single game changer for Newberry, and that's this Agritech Innovation Park. It's a long-term thing. It's a 20-year thing. But it is, if it comes to be, it's a game changer for Newberry. So we'll get that presentation in front of you. We're continuing to try to get the word out and meet with as many stakeholders as we can. And we received notification today from the State Department of Economic Opportunity that we are going to be the recipients of an $11,000 grant to develop marketing materials. So it's not a huge step, it's not a huge boon, but we'll be able to put together some marketing materials advancing the concept of Newberry's Agritech Research Park. The wetlands and stormwater issue, I've already mentioned that meeting, Board of County Commission meeting is on November the 2nd. It's going to be in the Grace Knight Auditorium. Tomorrow morning, I'll be in Gainesville at Alachua County Board of County Commissioners meeting on another item. If we have success, I'll be emailing you about it tomorrow, letting you know the good news from that meeting.
What time is that November 2nd meeting?
I'll forward that. I think that's a 1:30 meeting. Those are after lunch. Those are their informal, formal meetings. I think they're, and that's a possibility. And then as a couple of other things, on November the 4th, which is a Saturday, we are holding in our city the Newberry Fall Festival. It's going to be on Seaboard Coast Drive over here. It's going to be hugely successful like they always are. This is a Main Street event that the city participates in and sponsors, but just wanted to invite everybody. That's Saturday from 9 to 4 p.m. The city will have a booth there. If you guys want to sign up and work a shift in the booth and shake hands and kiss babies, we welcome you to do that. And then on November the 9th at Freddie Warmack Park at 4 p.m. we're going to have an Arbor Day celebration. It's kind of a small event, but it's really neat. We'll be planting a tree at Freddie Warmack Park like we do every year. It's part of our commitment to being a Tree City USA and Arbor Day. I invite you to that. We'll send all of our elected officials meeting invites. And then just last two things is just so that you know that it's on our radar. Our big initiatives moving into the fall are getting our police department feasibility report underway. We have a meeting on Thursday to get that kicked off and moving, and the development of our RFP for advanced metering infrastructure. And we're going to pull all that together very quickly. Once the RFP is developed, we'll have a workshop before we take any action on that. Just wanted to if there is enthusiasm to move the project forward, wanted to be able to do that without delay instead of saying just time out, give us a chance to write an RFP. So that's the way we're going to propose to address those two issues. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you very much. Madam Attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. At the last meeting, we talked about our mandatory 4-hour ethics training, and I know that Commissioner Coleman looks forward to it every year. And so last time we gave you 4 potential dates, and we were going to come back at this meeting and select a date. And just as a reminder, those dates were Wednesday, November 8th, Wednesday, November 15th, Monday, December 18th, or Thursday, December 21st.
And I'm sure we all remember that and have that day right off the top of our head. Do we want to rip the Band-Aid off and try to get it done the first meeting, the 8th?
The question is, what time? That's my primary question.
This is a 4-hour course, isn't it?
It's a 4-hour course, so whatever works for the commission, I can make myself available.
What year?
What are you off
Commissioner Farnsworth, you want to try to push it as late in the day so you don't have to take off as much time?
Yes, sir.
If we tried to get started around 5 o'clock on Wednesday the 8th, is that?
4 or 5 would be great.
Okay. Let's see. Wednesday the 8th, 5 p.m. Conflicts? Anyone? Going once?
What's for supper? It's a day after election day.
What would you like? Okay. All right, hearing no opposition, let's do it
Okay,
first
yep.
one? November 8th? November 8th, 5 PM, that'll be here.
Yes, sir.
Rick, you arrange dinner since you're so concerned about it. Okay. Anything else, Madam Attorney?
Other chances.
Oh, yes. I will be doing ethics training on November 7th, the day before in Archer. If any of you end up not being able to attend ours on the 8th, and that will be at 4 p.m. And in the city of High Springs on November 16th, but that will be at 1 p.m. That's
High Springs?
Yes, High Springs would be on
Okay.
Thursday, November 16th at 1 p.m.
And I believe that sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the county holds theirs. And our officials are welcome to go to any of those training opportunities. You just got to get it. It's unethical not to get it. But so when we find out those dates, as we find out about more dates and opportunities, we'll continue to forward them out to you.
Yes, the League of Cities has already done it here in Alachua County, and the county has previously talked about not doing it again and just paying for their individual commissioners to take courses instead of doing a big presentation. But if they do in fact do it this year, we'll certainly send out that date.
All right. And City Clerk?
None, Mr. Mayor,
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we'll move to the Commission, starting on my left this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. Across the street, we have this parking lot between the Utilities Department and the other building that's unpaved, and I just had some citizens recently tell me that it's a hazard. It's unstable, it's rocky, you can fall, and I wondered, is there any plan to get that paved, or did I miss that discussion somewhere?
There absolutely is a plan to get it paved.
Good.
It's in our 5-year CIP.
5 years.
No, well, it's in the 5-year CIP. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you what year it's in. I'm confident that it's not in the current year. We'd know about it. We get really excited when they're in the current year. But it is in the 5-year CIP, and every year during the budget cycle, you have the opportunity to ask us to prioritize certain projects, and we'd be happy to prioritize that project.
Thank you. Second of all, those of you who remember, gosh, it's been over 10 years ago when the city of Newberry was so blessed to get a designation of a Main Street city, and it was a big celebration at that time. Back then, you may not remember this either, but the city used to donate or contribute tens of thousands of dollars to the Main Street program every year. And over the years, that donation declined, and Main Street, it struggled. And so the commission, I remember, always encouraged them to get other streams of income. So I'm pleased to tell you tonight that there is a really easy way that the citizens can contribute to the Main Street program without any money coming out of their pocket. Has anybody ever heard of Amazon? I don't know, kind of a little town. If you buy anything on Amazon, there is a way you can go through it. Let me get my notes here. Amazon Smile. And you can designate the Newberry Main Street organization as your charity. They will donate 0.5% of everything you buy from here on out to the Newberry Main Street organization. So without any skin off our backs, I'm very proud of the Main Street organization to find this stream of income that doesn't cost the city anything, doesn't cost the citizens anything, but can greatly enhance the pocketbook of the Main Street organization to serve our city and do more programs. It's called, hang on a second, there's a website you can go to, and it's called smile.amazon.com. And just follow the instructions for, a charity that you can donate to. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Excuse me, appreciate that. I'll hold mine until the end. Commissioner Farnsworth? Commissioner McGee? Commissioner Coleman? Such a jerk. Just kidding.
All right, just looking for some updates on a couple of things. The demo of the Kincaid, do we know what's happening with that?
Well, the last we spoke, the next step was to remove asbestos before we got into demolition. We've completed the asbestos removal. The real holdup has been the delay in completing our fire department project.
Okay.
We've just had all hands on deck to make sure we successfully completed that with us our budget remaining intact. Actually had a a consultant out today that wasn't looking at the Kincaid building, but had expertise in it and expressed an interest in it. So we're still, before we just start wrecking it and hauling it away in dump trucks, we're still looking for a way to salvage all the reusable, to deconstruct the building and salvage all the reusable materials. So when we start seeing availability and time to begin taking that task on, we're going to get real serious about how to approach that so that we can deconstruct it properly and not waste all those nice resources.
All right. And then the fire station, we're still on track?
We are moving forward. On track might be a strong expression. The project continues to move forward. At a meeting last week, we were giving a October 31st substantial completion date. And there is daily progress. Not quite as fast as we'd like, but certainly faster than taking some action that might be very conclusive type actions that would stop us dead in our tracks while we try to figure out where we're going to go. So, right now the best course of action for us is to be patient with the contractor as long as they continue to work, and we still get good results, and they have been providing good results. Then we're going to continue to be patient. Hopefully by the end of the month.
All right, and then the multi-purpose fields. I know that we've closed on that property.
We have. Our next steps in there are Alachua County, the St. John's, the Suwannee River Water Management District is a player in this proposal. We've been meeting with them for now going on a year, and about transferring the 60 acres that they own to the city. And their board met a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, with a recommendation to transfer the property to the city, and the board was moving that direction, and the chair stepped in and said we need to table this and rethink it. And so they tabled it, and they're rethinking it, and I think we can move the project forward either way, but having clear title to the property allows us to move it forward more directly. So we're going to try to get with the chair of the Water Management District and see if we can't address his concerns and find out whether the majority of the board shares his concerns or whether they tabled it out of respect, and see where that's going to go. So then that's running parallel to development of the master plan. We just want to make sure we get that finalized before we proceed. We have a survey in hand, so we can move forward on that master plan, and so we expect to be making positive progress on that through the fall and into the spring next year.
Maybe we'll get the river grant at the same time. Maybe they can do a package deal. And then the only other thing that I had, I came across this the other day. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of 1 Million Cups. It's like an event every week that it started, I guess, somewhere out west, but they have over 1,000 locations now throughout the United States, and it gives entrepreneurs a chance to basically make a sales pitch in front of a group of people. They actually have one over in Gainesville, and they do it every Wednesday, I believe, over at Santa Fe College downtown. I thought that was kind of a neat idea. They actually have a live stream, and they do have an archive where you can go back but that might be another avenue that we could look at as far as someone trying to pitch an idea. Maybe I don't know how far along some of these people are, but it might be something worth looking into. If somebody's got some time to go and watch a couple of these presentations, they might be looking for a home. So
absolutely.
I just wanted to pass that on if anybody wanted to check it out. It's the number 1millioncups.com, and that's all I've got.
Commissioner Coleman.
The reason I ran for Group 1 so I could be the first to go.
Not tonight.
You're next to last.
Only thing I got is 7 p.m. Wednesday night, regional championship for our Newberry girls volleyball team. We're playing Bowles High School, so if you don't have a chance, every day to see Mercedes and Lamborghinis, all the parents will be here bringing their kids here. You'll see all kind of probably real fancy cars from Bowles High School or helicopters. So they won the district championship last week and going into regionals, which is pretty tough playing Bowles. So we need to pack the house. And that's all I got.
That day is, what day is that again?
That's Wednesday at 7 p.m.
Very good. Thank you
Just
very
out
much.
of curiosity, we won our district?
We won our district again.
Wouldn't we be playing the number 2 from another district?
We would. Episcopal one was number 1. It went 5. Episcopal and Bowles played. Went 5 sets, and Episcopal won, I think, 25-23.
Wow.
Am I right?
Great.
If you're within 1, you have to go.
That's right.
But got to be 2. So yeah,
It's a great first
25.
draw.
So
What's your prediction?
Newberry in 3 sets.
Very good. I have three quick things. Halloween trick-or-treating is on the 31st. Despite repeated attempts otherwise on the forum, Halloween is trick-or-treating on the 31st. Mayor Marlowe texted me that Brandon Bulla is moving on to state in the golf. And just to reiterate, if you could keep Amari and her family in your prayers while they're dealing with the passing of her mom. That concludes my comments. Anybody from the citizens wish to speak? I'd like to thank our special guest from WUFT tonight. This is his christening ceremony for our first meeting. I hope you're as thoroughly entertained as we are. Very good. All right, hearing no further business, we are adjourned.